Question 50 of the Prima Secunda of the Summa Theologia continues in the Treatise on Habits, and this is of the subject of habits, question 50. And again, this is a pretty short treatise, just 6 questions overall, and we're in the second one now. And in these 6 articles, St. Thomas Aquinas is going to be asking questions about where exactly in the human person, and even in the angels. In the 6th article, he asks about habits in the angels, but where are they found? What faculties do they apply to? Is it the body? Is it the intellect? Is it the will? That kind of thing. That's what's on his mind. And so in Article 1, he says whether there is a habit in the body. And so I show a man running here, and is the habit or the virtue, I guess you could say, to be found in his body? Is that where it says? St. Thomas says habit is a disposition of a subject which is in a state of potentiality either to form or to operation. Okay, so either the form is in potentiality or the operation is. And the potentiality aspect is going to be very important, because when we get to that question on the angels, he's going to ultimately come down and say, yeah, there are some habits in angels because they do have potentiality. They're not complete act like God would be, or God is, I should say. Therefore, insofar as habit implies disposition to operation, no habit is principally in the body as its subject, for every operation of the body proceeds either from a natural quality of the body or from the soul moving the body. So either the body moves kind of naturally, and I think what he means by that is things like that are regulated by our vegetative aspect of our soul, like the circulation of our blood or the excretory system, or that kind of thing, the digestive system. It just happens. There's no aspect of our command or free will that's an aspect of it. He says, as to the operations which proceed from the soul through the body, they belong principally to the soul, secondarily to the body. Like this guy running, it's not the habit isn't in the body, it's in the soul that is making the determination that he's going to go run, and therefore the dispositions to such operations are principally in the soul, but they can be secondarily in the body, to wit, insofar as the body is disposed and enabled with promptitude to help in the operation of the soul. So you know that if you wake up in the morning and you go running, or you're going to eat a healthy meal, sometimes your body or the lower part of your soul may rebel a bit or have a say in the matter, and that would relate to habits and virtues as well. Article 2, whether the soul is the subject of habit in respect of its essence or in respect of its power. He says habit implies a certain disposition in relation to nature or to operation. Okay, he mentioned that in the last article as well. If therefore we take habit as having a relation to nature, it cannot be in the soul. That is, if we speak of human nature, for the soul itself is the form completing human nature. So that's kind of interesting, philosophy there, as far as what makes a human being is that when the rational soul is joined with matter, with a body, and then you have one substance, right, according to Thomas and Aristotle, and therefore it can't be in the soul, because the soul, the soul and the nature is dependent upon the soul, because the soul provides the nature of a human being. I think that's what he's saying. But if we speak of a higher nature of which man may become a partaker, according to 2 Peter 1, that we may be partakers of the divine nature, thus nothing hinders some habit, namely grace, from being in the soul in respect of its essence. So Wisdom 8:1, which Thomas quotes a lot in the Summa, says God orders all things sweetly, and that means that he places qualities within our soul, like grace, like the theological virtues, in order that we may fulfill our end, which is union with him, because otherwise we wouldn't have any chance of achieving our final end if he didn't help us. Okay, that's very fundamental in Thomistic philosophy. On the other hand, if we take habit in its relation to operation, it is chiefly thus that habits are found in the soul, insofar as the soul is not determined to one operation, but is indifferent to many, which is a condition of habit, because a habit can't be forced to go in one particular direction. Otherwise, it would just be natural and it wouldn't have any use for a habit or a virtue, right? Article 3, whether there can be any habits in the powers of the sensitive parts. He says the sensitive powers can be considered in two ways. First, according as they act from natural instinct. Secondly, according as they act at the command of reason. Accordingly, as they act from natural instinct, they are ordained to one thing, even as nature is, but according as they act on the command of reason, they can be ordained to various things, and thus there can be habits in them by which they are will or ill disposed in regard to something, right? So again, there has to be some kind of contingency. There has to be the ability to go in two different directions if there's going to be something that is related to habits and to virtue. Are there any habits in the intellect? He is going to say that yes, there are habits in the intellect. The reason why we know this is because there are intellectual virtues. In fact, when we do get to the section on intellectual virtues, Thomas will talk about the primary intellectual virtue being wisdom. That's the highest one. Prudence is an intellectual virtue and also a cardinal virtue. And understanding and knowledge and art, I think those are the five. All right. So if there are intellectual virtues, then there must be habits in the intellect. Is there habit in the will? He will say again here, there's a question that will come up later about whether there are any virtues that are not related to passion, because most of the virtues are related to passion in some way. And he says, yeah, the virtue of justice. The virtue of justice relates to the will, and the will is not in the sensitive appetite, and so it's intellectual. It's the intellectual appetite. So the virtue of justice is related to the will, and if there's a virtue that's related to the will, then there must also be a habit that's related to the will as well. Are there habits in angels? He begins by saying that some have said that there are no habits in the angels, and that whatever is said of them is said essentially. Now, this opinion contains some truth and some error, that only a being in potentiality is the subject of habits. So the above-mentioned commentators, who he did mention, I didn't mention their names, Maximus and Simplicius, consider that angels are immaterial substances and that there is no material potentiality. Yet since, though there is no material potentiality in angels, yet there is still some potentiality in them, for to be pure act is something that belongs to God alone. All right, so God alone is pure act, and so there has to be potentiality in the angels, and anything that has potentiality is also going to be subject to habits and also virtue as well. So he says, since no angel attains to the perfection of God, but all are infinitely distant therefrom, for this reason, in order to attain to God himself through intellect and will, the angel needs some habits, being as it were in potentiality in regard to that pure act. So that does it for question 50 on the subject of habits. Thanks for joining me, and I hope you'll come back tomorrow for the next video as we continue our journey through the Summa, one question at a time. God bless you.